In this episode, I interviewed Cindy DiPrima. Cindy's been a stylist since 1998 and has been freelancing since 2002. She co-founded Cat Beauty, an all-natural, clean beauty store and spa in the West Village. I want to note that the store is now closed, but Cap does have an online presence with really fab products. Cap was truly the first to do it in terms of creating a beauty lifestyle brand. The belief behind the brand is that what you put inside your body and topically affect your overall wellness, something that I obviously agree with. Cindy left Cap in 2020, but still continues to freelance as a stylist and is a huge proponent of living naturally. I was drawn to Cindy via Instagram, which we get into in this episode. But to put it simply, she just seemed real, and I could tell that we shared a similar lifestyle. In this episode, we talk about the cleansing life and this niche community we've cultivated here in New York, the life scenarios that led us to, let's just say, the colonic table, what keeps us in this cleansing life, and so much more. Cindy is an absolute OG. She's so real and so honest, and I know you'll feel inspired by her, just like I did and still do. Without further ado, here's my interview with Cindy DiPrima. Welcome, Cindy,
Thank you.
to the Combined channel.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's so nice to meet you finally.
I know, it's so funny. I feel like I know you from like your
Likewise.
content, and also like Instagram's weird like that. So
Yeah, I agree. It's funny how I love the friendships that form over Instagram.
yeah.
But it is funny because you do have a false sense of knowing people, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, it's called like the parasocial relationships.
Oh, I didn't know it had a name.
That's the term, yeah. It's like you feel like you know somebody.
It's like, I think I know Andrew Huberman, but like we don't know each other at all. But
Right.
like you and I have that's a little closer.
We have more of a rapport because we're also part of this natural living space.
Totally.
It's like, it's a niche space.
Totally.
Which I like. It's
Totally.
cool. It's a good community,
I
just
agree.
of people.
I mean, I think there's something that goes off like a trigger almost when you hear, especially with food combining, there's like not a lot of us.
No.
And it's like there's a few of us across the globe and we find each other through things like Instagram. And I think that's pretty weighty.
No, totally. And like word of mouth, because like we're gonna be talking about Gil probably.
Yeah, of course. But there's like a sorority of us that all go through Gil that have gotten to know each other. And
Truly.
and I think there's an automatic kind of knowing of each other and respect, and maybe it's partially like table talk, but also just knowing that we all kind of live the same life. I think there's also fraternity, or I said sorority, I guess it might be more applicable, but there's connection in that. Like we know pretty much how each other live and like what the challenges are and the upsides and the, I don't know, just all of it.
Totally. And like you don't just end up on a colonic table either. So like it's like we've all like gone through some health thing, or like have something that brought us there, a traumatic or like some life-changing moment or something that like happens that like makes you live radically. Because
I think so. I think so. And it's also, I think I've always felt like food combining and the life that we call it,
the cleansing life.
The cleansing life. I think there's a real intuitive component to it. I think some people are just drawn to it very distinctly, and I think that some people might never totally get it, and that's okay. It's just not for them.
Yeah.
But I do think, like for me, when I first learned about it and I'd heard about it, it was such a duh. Like it just made so much sense to me, and it was never overwhelming. And I know people who read about food combining and they're just so flummoxed by it, and they can't figure out how to get it right or do it right. And I never understood that because it seems so simple to me. But I also get that there's enough people like that it's just not for everyone. Though it should be.
You know, it's funny. It's funny, and that's the thing about like why I'm even like doing this is like because we all have a digestive system. Fred Bishy sort of said this in his own, I'm misquoting him, but this is essentially what he said. Yeah. Like, the design of the human body hasn't changed. And that is the truth, and that's really what it is. We all digest food.
Yeah.
So it's like we talk about how people in schools or students should learn about financial literacy. I think you should also learn how your body works.
Big time.
And that's another story. But like, you know, I think that it's important. So that's why I started this, because I'm like, I want people to understand, especially you do transcendental meditation. Is that right?
I do. I've not practiced it regularly in a while, but I have been taught. I have an amazing teacher, and I get drawn back into it, and I do feel like it's coming back soon.
It's okay.
Because there's really nothing better. It's so it's so simple. And I do crave it when I'm not doing it.
It is. And like for me, like I always say, like the two things that like changed my life were TM.
Interesting.
And food combining.
When did you learn TM?
I learned it in college. I was going through like such, I know, I was going through such like crippling severe anxiety.
Oh, wow.
And it, like on medication, like medication after medication, they changed it. Like
intense.
This is, I'm open.
It's great.
You know, was on like the Klonopin and then the Lexapro and then just all the stuff.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what switched in me. And I'm like, okay, I don't like the way I feel on this.
Right.
And then
there might have been a threshold, like where that substance builds up in your body to a certain point where
I didn't feel
it
like
starts
myself.
to take over or shift things. And
I just didn't feel like myself.
Yeah.
I knew something was wrong.
Or maybe your mental state was getting healthier and that
maybe
you didn't need it anymore.
I was studying abroad in Florence.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it because I would never recommend anybody. I'm looking into the camera. I'll never recommend anybody do this. I stopped cold turkey. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
But I did.
Yeah.
And that was like in 2015.
Okay.
And I just then that summer I ended up learning TM.
Okay.
Through my mom's therapist who suggested it.
That's great. That's a good therapist.
It is a good therapist. She's awesome. So I learned TM, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't need medication.
Yeah,
and I also came to realize like it made me not an anxious person. And it created like such unhealthy habits for me. Like just disordered eating because I just didn't want to eat because I was so anxious.
Yeah.
So I was getting mistreated for things. It was just a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like I said, like, you know, nothing, you don't just end up on the colonic table.
No, of course not.
For nothing.
Yeah. Of course not.
But yeah, so like, anyways, that's how I ended up coming to TM because I wanted to go deeper.
Yeah.
And I knew there was another solution.
Right.
So how did you learn TM then?
I learned TM. It was really just almost like a gift. We had a customer at Cat Beauty who was in the store one day, and I kept looking at her like, I know her. And finally, I approached her and I said, "Do we know each other?" And she said, "I don't think so." She said, "But I'm an actress and a model." And I was like, "No, that's not it. I know you. I know you." And then we started chatting about something more, and she mentioned her mom, and I had this download that I had styled her apartment for a story for the very first issue of Domino magazine, like back in the day. And the story was about mothers and daughters. And so I spent like 2 days with this woman shooting her apartment and then shooting her mom's apartment. And we, of course, like it's so social, and we chatted a ton. And we went on to become really close friends. Like we're still really close friends to this day. And she's one of the advisors for the David Lynch Foundation.
Oh, cool.
And so she introduced Carrie Lynn and I to Bob Roth. And he was our teacher and is our teacher. I guess it's an ongoing thing. But we did the training with him. Yeah. And then, we'd go back for check-ins.
It's funny because people, and I find this in you, like even just talking to you, like I feel calm. Like there is a calm presence in people who practice TM.
Yeah,
but seriously,
so.
like
I think it's also the lifestyle
and the lifestyle.
I think there's like a contentment. I mean, Gil always talks about it. Is that cleansing, that kind of constant cleansing? I think it is very. You find a state of contentment, I think, in it.
Yeah.
That is maybe the best part of it. Is just like this. It's sort of similar to what people get who are super religious.
In a way, yeah. I mean, it's maybe. Like, I like something else he said. Gil, we're going to mention Gil.
Yeah.
Gil's like, he's known as like the godfather of colonics, which is a funny I'm excited to ask him how he feels about that term. Just like being known as that. But he's coming.
Somebody at CAP made it. I don't know if it was a typo or just a mistake on something we printed when he was giving a talk, and they referred to him as the grandfather of Colonics. He was probably like, yeah. Given that he's like 64.
Oh my God.
44.
Love proofreading.
You know.
That's really funny.
Yeah,
okay, good. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's
the godfather
of Colonics.
And like a big educator in the natural cleansing.
Yeah.
Food combining, detox.
Yes.
Cellular cleansing.
And he'll be on a later episode, so we will totally learn his whole spiel. But we'll reference Gil a few times, just because he's a big part of our life and our relationship.
And our connection, yeah.
Totally. But he said happy cells make happy people.
Yes.
And that's another thing, too.
And clean cells can't be mean.
That I love clean. That's another one. Clean cells can't be mean.
Mm-hmm. You should put that on a t-shirt.
Back to how we know each other.
Yes.
So, okay. So I, like when I got into this world, our world that we talk about, the cleansing life,
yes.
I discovered it through social media, through Nicole Berry.
Yeah.
Then discovered Gil through her.
Right.
Googled him, and then I found the Thinking Cap piece on him, or maybe he was called the grandfather.
Yeah.
So that's funny. But I found the Thinking Cap. And then I was like, okay, Cat Beauty.
Right.
And then it was so funny because I remember you followed me. And again, this space is so niche that I was like, cool.
Oh.
No, I'm not kidding.
Well, I mean, I first heard of you at Gil's because there was a sign on, I think, advertising.
Sweet.
Which it caught my eye. And I think you followed me on Instagram. And
I could have.
It's possible. I
Anything's
can't remember.
possible.
Or maybe I just found you that way. I don't remember. But
or you followed me back.
Or maybe you were following
either way.
Cap Beauty.
I was following
Cap. I was managing their account at the time. So somehow I found you on Instagram, and and I've been following, and it's been fun watching your business grow. And I love simple businesses. I'm always attracted to that, and I'm always attracted to seeing, especially. I think I'm going to call it the new economy. It's not new, it's digital.
Yeah.
But just the way that we build businesses now, being someone who kind of was in my 20s in the 90s.
Yeah.
The world has changed so much. And like we used to have, I kind of like spent my 20s in like sort of punk rock, indie rock circles. Okay. And there was this real ethos around doing it yourself. And it was DIY, and it was all about like just figure out how to get it done and do it. Yeah. And that was all great. But now is when we really have the resources to do that, right? I mean, you don't need to buy a page in Vogue to advertise something. You have social media. Like there's so much more capability to build a business from nothing. Just creating these businesses that I know there's a lot of sweat and blood involved too. It's not easy, but it's also just the availability of media has changed so much.
It totally has. I basically started seeding influencers.
Right.
So I kind of got in at like this tiny sliver of time in 2019 where that worked.
Yes.
I don't know if that works now.
That's probably true. I think there's Instagram fatigue. I think there's a lot of...
I'm fatigued.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I mean, we were just talking about that. I personally, I can't stand all the sounds and the videos. And I know that's the way of Instagram now. But I kind of miss when it was just pictures.
I do too.
I don't like the little icons and the photos and the grid. I don't like the noise. I don't like all them. Like, I don't want to watch a reel. I know. Honestly, I know.
I'm guilty of reels.
I'm a dinosaur. And
to be honest,
I also get sucked into reels. It's not that I love stories.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, stories reminds me of a magazine, which is what I grew up on and where I grew up working. But there is, it's just a comfort level. And then, in 3 years, we'd be having a totally different conversation.
It's hard because it's like one and done in a way.
Right.
You know,
right.
whereas I guess in a world where it's like people expect to know a lot about your life and they want to know about your, you know, the ins and outs and what you're doing and what you're really doing, which I think is important to a level.
Right. So it's funny because I grew up with magazines, of course, and magazines are aspirational, right? And at a certain point, they got harshly criticized for like body image and the, you know, and the going saying was like, if you want to feel better about yourself, stop reading fashion magazines. And the funny thing is, I never felt that way from reading magazines. I always felt inspired.
Me too.
And I felt I took things away from them. And I would look at a page, and I never looked at a page and thought like, I'll never look like Kate Moss and I'll never be in the Alexander McQueen dress. I actually looked at it and was like, oh, I have something yellow. That looks so fresh. I love that color. And I think there's different people who react differently to the same thing. And I think that you can't cater to everyone. And so, there are some people who probably shouldn't read fashion magazines, and there's some people who shouldn't follow people that trigger them.
Yeah.
But there's also, I think, room to just put material out that inspires people. And I think it could go either way. But I do think you're right, being like an advisor or an expert on something like health, it is important to be real, and it's important to have good information, of course. And also to maybe share with people, like when something you're doing stops working,
isn't working,
or when something,
if you don't like something,
if you change your outlook on something, or if you don't like something, or I think there's room for everything.
I totally agree. So you grew up on an apple farm.
No, my mom did.
Your mom grew up on an apple farm.
Yes, I grew up moving around the country.
You grew up moving around the country.
Always in the suburbs. My dad is Brooklyn Italian.
Yes.
Born and raised in
Carroll
Carroll
Gardens. Yeah. Classic.
Went to like a liberal arts college, went to law school, became a lawyer. He's from kind of like radical Italian intellectual stock. His older sister was a beat poet named DiPrima, who had a pretty big following. And his younger brother was a Shakespeare director. And my dad was almost like the black sheep because he took all that intellectual training and became a lawyer. But so he changed jobs a lot. He worked for a lot of different companies, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom who grew up on an apple farm, but they weren't like your classic hard-working farmers. I mean, they probably did work hard, but her grandfather was a painter. He was an American Impressionist, and my grandfather was a painter and a potter. So it was sort of this art. It sounds a lot like what like a hipster is doing now upstate.
No,
they're like growing apples and painting.
That's actually funny.
Having a pottery studio, but like that.
And you live in the Catskills.
That was her upbringing, exactly. That was her upbringing, and so I was raised in this household that was there were resources. My dad was successful. My mom was pretty down to earth. Like it was very eco. And there was a lot of, she made pottery also, and she gardened, and we weren't, like, it was still the 70s and 80s, and there was plenty of, like, kind of trashy food, but there was also an ethos around cooking at home and taking care of the planet and that kind of stuff. And then what got me into health, my mom got sick when she was pretty young. She died at 49, and she had breast cancer, and she was a pretty healthy person by the standards of the day. I always tell Gil, I call it New York Times healthy. Like she read the Times, she did the right thing as she was told to do in that time frame. But that was also a time when like margarine was healthier than butter, and skim milk was really great food.
So she wasn't like making nut milks at home or
no,
anything.
but we had sprouts on a sponge in the kitchen. So like there was sort of both happening at the same time. And like she would buy Chips Ahoy, but she would also make hummus and buy the brown bread because it's healthier than the white bread.
Right.
So it was like a naive. And what's funny is I think that if she stuck with her upbringing, she'd look a lot more like the way we live today. Yeah. But she was informed by science and by all these new breakthroughs, and like, oh, we should eat margarine because it's healthier than butter because there's no cholesterol, whatever the argument was for margarine at the time. And so it was sort of I think there was an aspect of like better living through chemistry that she bought into.
We're so measured, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I think there's a lot of things like within overabundance.
You know.
I don't think there's like, it's not like bad.
No.
But I think that there is, I think it can be too much, especially when it comes to disordered eating.
I think it also severs us from our intuition.
Yes.
So we're looking for a number on a screen and not checking in with like, actually, how do I feel? How was my sleep last night? What does it feel like to not sleep well? Or if you got a good night's sleep or not, don't you?
Yeah. No, I mean, you wake up tired.
Yeah, you wake up tired. You know that you woke up 3 times
your
in the
eyes
middle of the night, or
like
I mean, I think that we should be using as our first check-in just how we feel and how, I think that a lot of us know when we're coming down with something or when something is off. I mean, sometimes we need clues later because sometimes, especially like say with your menstrual cycle, right? Like you don't feel great, you feel horrible, you're cranky, you feel fat, and then you get your period and you're like, oh, that's why.
We're more, that is true. Sometimes it's a shock.
Right? Sometimes it's a shock.
But we are like more in tune, I guess, with that.
Right.
As women. But it's just that I feel like a lot of people, and again, like it goes back to kind of the way, with food combining and TM.
Right.
Create self-awareness and introspection.
Right.
More than, in my opinion, more than anything I've tried, and I've tried a lot, and I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I say these things are radical. They're not.
Right.
They're really not. They're, people think, especially like Colonics, are radical. They're
right.
They're not compared to, some stuff people are willing to do.
Well, I've always been kind of fascinated by like health practices, especially kind of the more hippie health practices. And as a kid, I had a friend who also, her mom was my piano teacher and was also a dear friend of my mom. So we were, sort of family friends. And Joan was a bit older, and she was this really special woman. So she taught piano to me as a kid, and she had a very early, young case of breast cancer. And she started chemotherapy, and she didn't like it. She didn't think it was correct. She was hearing loudly from herself to stop. And she quit chemotherapy and started working with a macrobiotic teacher in Manhattan. And this must have been like in the early 80s, right? So this was like a long time ago. And she healed, and she lived on macrobiotic food and fed kind of regular healthy food to her family. And like I remember being over there for dinner, and she served us dinner and what looked like a really nice healthy dinner. And then I noticed she was eating a bowl of something else. And I was so fascinated, like, what is she eating? Like, what's wrong with this that is not good enough for what she's doing? And I wanted, like, we're having like pasta with vegetables, and she was having like brown rice and broccoli, right? But it was like part of her program. And so that, like, even as a kid, I was sort of fascinated by that. I wasn't a healthy kid. I was like a regular kid, but it was fascinating to me. And I, even just like the growing sprouts in the kitchen, like I was involved in that. Those were things that I, was really interested in. After my mom died, I definitely got more interested. So food combining was something that I kept getting put in front of me, right? So I remember the first time I heard about food combining, I was working on a shoot. I was still working in TV and film at the time, so I was doing set stuff, like art department stuff. And I was really young. We were shooting at some apartment in the East Village. It was like in the basement. Lunchtime came around, and the producer offered the homeowner to share lunch, and he said, oh, I don't know if there's anything I can eat there. And so I was fascinated, like, why can't he eat the food? Like, what does he do that's different? And he looked at the table of food,
no fruit,
and he didn't see anything that was correct. So I saw him grab an avocado, and he opened the avocado and just started eating the avocado with a spoon. And at the time, like, fat-free was still the dominant thing. So I was like, okay, this isn't about the fat. What's he doing? So I asked him, and he like turned me onto the Diamonds book.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right? The Harvey.
Yeah,
and
Fit for
Marilyn
Life.
Diamond. Yeah.
I laugh
Something like
because when I read it, like, because sometimes from time to time I like, will go back.
Yeah.
And it's the verbiage.
I know. Although I think there's a quote from that book that has stuck with me, and sadly I don't remember 100% that it was from that book, but I remember it was like the wife, like the wife author wrote this, so it could have been a different book, but I think it was them. And she did rules for like how to manage your body weight, and one of her rules was never, ever, ever overeat. And I was basically like, if that was the only rule anyone ever...
That's the intuitive eating thing.
Yeah.
Like, people don't get that, but also it's like, don't overeat. You're like, yep.
Yep.
Thanks.
So that was that chapter of that. I might have tried it for a little bit. Like, I was curious about it. Then, like, years later, I was working at Martha Stewart, and everybody started getting into this book that it was written by a Swedish nutritionist. I think her name was Gudrun Johnson, and we all just called it The Regime. I think it had the word gut in the title. I don't totally remember, but it was a food combining book, basically.
Okay.
So I read that, and we did that. Like, my friends and I all did that for a while. And again, it made sense. I felt good.
Yeah.
But and I don't remember the exacts of that, but like, it wasn't what we do now. I think there was like oat bran in the morning, and like, you know, there was like, it wasn't exactly how we live now.
Yeah.
And then like years after that, I came across Natalia's book, and I remember very distinctly, I was reading this magazine. It was this Condé Nast magazine that like came and went really fast, but there was a little bit in the beginning, in the front of the book, that was a photo of her book, that original like super vibrant cover with the tomatoes on it.
Yeah.
And there was a recipe for green lemonade. And I was so attracted to it. I cut it out and I put it on the fridge, and I went and bought a juicer, and I like completely changed the way I ate, and I felt amazing. And I remember going on shoots, and like I would figure out how to eat the catered lunch.
Totally.
In a food combined way, and I felt really good, and it was great. And I read about Gil, and of course I was fascinated, but I like was kind of scared to go. And I think the fact that he was a guy or like something, I was younger then, and like it didn't bother me, but I was intimidated. Wellness visits, I think, can be really scary for people because you're scared. Like I used to get really scared even going to like, you know, some kind of like sound table meditation thing, because like the intuitive person who's leading it is going to tell me that I'm going to die. Like, you know, like there was always that fear of like this person can, or like showing my tongue to the acupuncturist. Like, what if she sees that I have cancer? You know, like those kinds of like fearful, like the same reason that people are scared to go to psychics. One thing that I've evolved from so much is just the fear of getting breast cancer, because my mom had it so young.
That makes sense.
Right? And like, I think one of the most empowering things about health and wellness is actually feeling like you have some control over it, which is maybe a bad thing or maybe a good thing, but it, like, for me, it's helped me.
It's, I
know the control can go too far, but I also think that having a sense of sovereignty and a sense of agency over my own health has been very helpful.
No, I feel that food combining gave me, like, and it's something Nicole actually talks about a bunch. It's like, it gave me like food freedom.
I completely agree.
You know?
I think we talked about this earlier, where some people get very overwhelmed by the rules of food combining. For me, they were very
logical
but
and
I think freeing, and it's just sort of a framework that you can play and have fun within, and it's almost like a game of like. And I see Nicole doing that with her recipes.
You have to like cooking at home. Do you agree?
Totally. Well, I think you have to have a certain toleration for it. I do think, like, at the end of the day, a lot of the meals can be very simple.
Yes,
and
I agree.
Simplicity is actually probably your best friend.
Oh my God. Right? I'm like, especially like planning menus all the time, and like having to change menus, and like, you know, volume, and, you know, also just there's a lot of different reasons, like simplicity, and I eat simple. It's a lot of information.
Right.
In practice, it's so much easier. As someone who, I guess, treats food as medicine, which is something I do, what was it like then in 2015?
Right.
In the world of supplements?
Yes.
How was that like then? Because now it's the landscape has changed as well.
Is totally different. So 2015 was the year we opened CAP. We started working on the concept in 2014, and my business partner, Carrie Lynn, I will say, like, one of her greatest gifts is just sort of this knowing of what's next. Like, she's really good at seeing the next trend, and trend is even not the best word. She's wiser than that, but there's a skill to kind of having.
She had an apparel store.
She had a fashion store.
So you do have to know trends.
Yeah, she did. And but even her store had so much more. Like, she started selling natural beauty at the store. And that's, in fact, why we called it CAP, is that her store was called Castor and Pollux. And CAP was like the initials from that.
Oh, cool.
And so it was almost like as if Castor and Pollock had a beauty department. That's what we would be. And so we're sitting in the basement on 10th Street. We had this office in the basement of her old store, and it was like disgusting. I mean, it was like the dankest basement office you can imagine. But it was in the West Village, and we were like,
I got it,
eager and so excited, and we knew we were onto something, and it was really fun. And she had this idea. She had seen something, and she was fascinated by it, and she sent an email. And next thing I know, she's on the phone with this guy, and they're having a crazy conversation. And it was Scott from Sun Potion, and she called him up to kind of find out more about what Sun Potion was and is, and adaptogens, reishi, like all of these things that were like speaking another language. I mean, reishi was something that we sort of knew about, but like, I've never been a huge supplement person, and I've never been a big like I am to some degree, but I wasn't ever, and still am not, someone who feels like that's the first line of defense. But the adaptogen thing was totally new, like fascinating.
Like mushrooms and all
we bought the reishi, and we bought I can't remember what else we bought. It was some very basic, like maybe reishi and ashwagandha, right?
Okay.
And we put them on the website. So we opened the website about a year before we opened the store. It was always meant to be a store. We had a lease, but it took us a while to renovate and build it. So we launched the website earlier, and we actually had a piece of press coming out. We were in W way too early. But because we knew that May issue of W was going to drop in April, we were like, or maybe it was the June issue dropping in May, we had to get the website up because we didn't want the magazine to come out and not have anywhere to go. So it was also good because it just motivated us to get it up.
And get a digital presence.
Yeah. And so we started selling Sun Potion online.
Wow.
And it was like doing really well. And I was like, I don't understand what this stuff is, but it's got some energy. It's so eye-opening because it is kind of fascinating the way those herbs work in the body, and I'm still not a big consumer of them, but just because I think they speak to certain things, and probably my ADHD would have benefit, but it's not, as I said, like, I think different people are drawn to different things. I'm super drawn to food combining and colonics and the cleansing life. Other people are drawn to herbs, right?
Yeah.
But it was really eye-opening. Like, and then we started selling the Beauty Chef, which was like a probiotic drink that was from Australia. And then we just started expanding the food and supplements because it was so fun for people and fun for us. I mean, Carrie Lynn and I were both really into food and entertaining and cooking and collecting cookbooks and all of that. And so having food in the store felt authentic to us.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Which was fun.
So, like, okay, coming from like a space that's mostly, supplements, and and you're not like the biggest.
Right. Well, we were mostly skincare.
Okay.
And beauty.
Okay.
So, which is funny that you even think of us as more supplements, because our investors were always like, are you a food store or a beauty store?
Yeah.
But that was a little bit of a sticking point. But I mean, I think that one of the things I can be most proud of about CAP is like we were really the first beauty store to sell food. Right? To put that stuff in the context of beauty.
Yeah.
Like supplements existed at health food stores but they weren't at the beauty store.
So interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like before like Clean Market.
Oh yeah.
And everything.
Yeah, she was a customer.
Like that
really.
is so, yeah, she's great.
She's great.
I like her a lot.
Yeah, me too. She's very talented.
Everyone in this space is cool.
Yeah.
But so that's interesting. But I guess so like coming from that,
yeah.
what do you like roll your eyes at now?
Oh.
and that's a broad question.
I know.
So,
well, it's what's funny about it is I guess if you had to really drill it down to one thing, I roll my eyes at anyone who thinks they have the answer for everyone.
okay.
Right? Personally, I roll my eyes a little bit at like this push to eat insane amounts of protein. Yes. That scares me. I'm not really down with like the collagen and the, things like that. Mm-hmm. I wonder sometimes if half the people who take collagen know that they're eating like
they don't know
where it comes from. But it's also I try to not judge any of that. Mm-hmm. Like I am mostly vegan. I do sometimes eat butter, but
sure.
I don't judge anyone. I'm married to a hunter.
Okay. Right?
Like my kids will sit down and eat the heart of a deer that he shot at the table, and it's like
it's
my
it
life. But I I definitely try not to judge other people's anything that's making someone feel good and giving them benefits. However, there are things that I probably like intellectually don't think is correct, but I'm no expert, right? I mean, I'm just somebody who's like found a way that works well for me to live.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely curious about this like crazy protein thing that I see going on that seems a little excessive to me. Like, when you see people like working really hard to squeeze in the number of grams of proteins that they think they need to eat. Yeah. It's like anything that's that hard to do doesn't seem like you're supposed to be doing it, but I also like don't judge it till you try it. I don't know. I know a lot about the way we live. Yeah. I don't know that the way we live is necessarily right for somebody else. And especially if that person seems to be thriving. I like to believe it would work for everyone, and I think one of the beautiful things about food combining and the cleansing life is that you actually can be an omnivore and do it. You don't have to be vegan. You don't have to be, but there is a rationality to not overdoing and not eating like 10 eggs for breakfast and a bowl of meat for lunch. Like that doesn't make sense to me at all, but there are also different goals people have. Like, so
it's funny because I've I've heard this, like the carnivore thing.
Yeah.
Not talking. My algorithm, I don't get that. Like, I don't get served that.
Right.
I'm so happy I don't get served
that. I actually don't think I get served it on Instagram.
But I hear about it a lot.
I hear it on podcasts, I think.
Yeah. And like
but
people...
that said, sorry to interrupt.
No.
I listened to an amazing podcast episode that was on Tetragrammaton, which is Rick Rubin's podcast.
Okay.
And he interviewed this guy who goes by Carnivore Aurelius. Do you know who that is?
No.
I mean, everything about it makes me want to roll my eyes. Like, okay, so you're into Stoicism and you only eat meat.
Oh,
This guy was amazing to listen to. He was so fascinating and I think Julia listened to it also. And I referred it to another friend who also found it just totally interesting. Because really this guy's message is like, get back to nature.
Sure.
He's probably like loosened up a little bit on the carnivore grip. But, I don't want to eat the way he eats.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to eat the way I eat. But I found his talk was incredible. But that said, like, I do tend to listen to podcasts that are sometimes outside of the way I live just because there's always something to learn. Yeah. And I see it a lot there. Like, I hear people talking about just, like, how many grams of protein we need to eat in a day. And it's not for me.
So people have asked me, like, somebody asked me, like, my husband is counting. Like, we're using my fitness tracker.
Yeah.
Like, you know, do you have calories or do you have like X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, unfortunately, I don't. And I have to, something, and I'm like, I have to kind of explain, like, you know, I don't know, because food combining is at the heart of my business. And so with that, like, you know, it's not about counting and restricting. And I have a totally pre-typed way of that
I'm sure that's
because
good.
because I get it a lot.
You probably do.
But it's again goes back to like the measuring of it all too, and like everything, and like it's so like fascinating how people are so protein driven. And again, we go into extremes of veganism or
and it goes back to that tracker thing, like the tracking devices and the counting and the, you know, it's not, that doesn't feel very free or fun to me, but
it's not sustainable.
Also, again, like intuition will lead us probably, you know, it's like you kind of know that when you eat the apple, it's the better choice than when you eat the 100-calorie bag of Pringles.
It's your gut feeling.
Even if the apple might have more calories. I don't even know if it does, but you know,
it's true. It's just true. It's people, it's the misinformation.
Right.
So that's why we're here.
Right.
Which is cool.
And I think that, you know, again, like for me, food combining makes so much sense.
Yes.
It's just
logical.
There's a logic to it that I really understand. And I think even more importantly, it's like the clinical data. Like it just works.
It does just work.
It does just work.
And like even my clients who are like 40 to 60 years old, which is cool. Like my one-on-one clients.
Yeah.
I get them to, you know, to food combine. They will do the whole like fruit. I always say to anyone who wants to start, like the fruit thing. Fruit in the morning before anything else, for your coffee, whatever. Eat as much fruit as you can. Really? Yes. Yeah. As much as you want, go for it. You know. Like maybe a week in or two, they're like, oh my God. They're like, do you know it's like 2 p.m. and I forgot to have coffee.
Yeah.
And they're like almost boomers, like in the way. Yeah. And I say that because, I mean, I'm from the Midwest. Like, this is very radical from even the way I grew up, right? Right, yeah. So it's like so crazy. I'm like, I get so excited by stuff like that because I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I stopped drinking coffee when I started. I didn't stop. That's okay. By the way, that's okay. Like, I just love it. Coffee, and all foods are included in food. Yeah, no, I know, but that's another thing. Space it 20 minutes.
Yeah, I drink it black. I always have.
Yeah, I used to too. It's funny.
But funny. My parents drank black coffee, and I just never thought of it as like. I always thought the other thing was weird. Like putting milk in your coffee. I always thought was kind of strange. Like I didn't understand that black coffee was actually not the way most people drink it. But
yeah, no, to be fair, I would put like a Splenda in it though. Oh. Anyways, I drink matcha now.
Oh, that's great.
And I love it. Like I love a matcha.
Matcha's delicious.
I also do a matcha latte that changes things. Yeah, with oat milk.
Nice.
So there's like,
where do you get your oat milk? What oat milk do you use?
I use milk.
Okay.
MALK, which is like 3 ingredients.
Nice.
And like, I'll be honest, because as much as we're, you know, like, as much as we're in this cleansing life and everything, I'll still go to like my local spot and get, as you should. I turn a little bit, like when I see Oatly, I'm like, like, because
you got to enjoy some things too. And also like, I think one of the beautiful things about being so kind of directed on a path is that if you stray off, you know how to get back on. And it's so, you've got these tools to cleanse and to live so well that like when you do enjoy something like that, it's really it's not a hit. Like you can handle it.
No, totally. You know? It's not going to kill me.
No. And also like everybody's got to enjoy some things. Like we all have some things we do that are like not ideal, but doing it, you know.
Totally. You worked at MTV.
I did. That was my first
Can you explain
job.
that?
Yes. I was super young. I just moved to New York and I was looking for a job. So right after college, I graduated from college. I was a philosophy major. And then I stayed at school and took like a 6-week design course in landscape architecture. And I really thought maybe I wanted to do that. But I think I really just loved design, and I loved like kind of shifting the focus and making things. And I lived in Portland for a couple of years and then moved to New York and was looking for a job. And I had a friend who was working full-time as a producer at MTV. And she knew me and she kind of knew my skills. And she was like, well, you're not working. So if you're looking to do something, I think you'd really like working with us. And we're always looking for PAs, which is a production assistant, which is like kind of like the person who does anything and everything on a film shoot. So it's like... the first day I was on the job, it was like the art department needed some help. I think my friend kind of knew to push me into the art department, and I did some project for the production designer, and she was like, okay, you're staying with us. Yeah. And then she started hiring me as an art assistant, and then when the show got renewed, she offered me a job as her assistant. Okay. And it was really fun because it was like there was so much variation in what we were designing and doing. It was like one week we'd be shooting them like as if they were all working in a police station, and the next week the set was like your parents' basement in the 70s, and the next week it was like a variety show stage. Cool. So I did a lot of research. I did a lot of picture research. So like, again, to the mood board thing, it was like I used to go to the picture collection at the public library and look for pictures to bring back to my designer boss to inspire, like to help her have references.
That's so interesting.
So dated.
And it keeps you like, but it keeps you on your toes.
Oh, well, I love that part of my job. Is like, I'm always on my feet. I'm never, like, there was like not a lot of time in front of a screen or, you know.
No, I think we're both people who like being like on our feet and like totally active, creative, like always like doing different things. Love a deadline. Love a deadline.
Me too.
And running to the last minute.
I like an assignment too, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do. Like having like a clear knowing of what I need to be doing.
Yeah. I think that is something that's like totally. I definitely like better under pressure and in a moment's notice. Yeah. So like with that, I'm gonna directly quote you. Because it's another thing we have in common. You said that you learned how to get everything done under the sun and get it anywhere fast when you worked at MTV.
Yes. Did I say that on Instagram?
You said it on an interview with Theory.
Oh, interesting. Yes. So yeah, I mean, prop styling, this is an amazing little known fact, but there is a text group in New York now, and it's maxed out at 32 of us, and we're basically like a union now of prop stylists. Wow. And we did it pretty well before, but now we're all in a text group together, and it is one of the best things in my life. And I say that because 32 people who are essentially competitors are basically combined now to help each other.
You guys should have like a warehouse.
Well, yeah, we should. I mean, that's actually an interesting idea because a lot of us have separate prop collections. But what we also do is like tip each other off when we find things or need things. Anytime you need something, especially like assistance.
I love that.
Like if my assistant is away and I get a last minute shoot and I don't have anyone to call, I just put the word out on the prop text. And it's like, oh, call this guy. He's my assistant. I'm not using him tomorrow. Yeah. Or, you know, and it's, or like, hey, does anyone know if there's quints around? I'm looking for quints. And somebody will write and say, I'm at Italy right now. There's a bunch. Do you want me to get them for you? It's amazing.
You learn how to find your like good communities of people who just want to help and don't want to like compete and like.
Yeah, it's really, it's like, and like we share jobs, we share assistants, we share resources, information, like. I had a big cedar log last week on a shoot, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I posted it. Like, somebody was looking for cedar bark last week. Do you still need it? Somebody else wrote to me and said, I know you already left your shoot, but I just got off the phone and I need a cedar log. Like, do you still have it? And I told her to call the studio, and she was actually shooting at the same studio the next day. And it was like things like that, and it also like. It's
how funny.
It's such a weird profession, and it's so
totally.
Every job is different. like you kind of think sometimes like, oh, I'm going to buy this marble pedestal because I might need it again.
Yeah.
But like you probably won't because
No,
everything is
no.
so specific. But there are some things that pay to kind of save and collect, but
Yeah.
it's a wild job.
No, it's funny
it's
because
fun.
it is fun. No, it's so I worked at Kith for 5 years.
Yes.
Which is like hilarious that at the time it's like 2018. Like luckily, I'll chalk it up a lot to New York City. You figure out how to get scrappy.
Definitely. Well, I think that's really I mean, I don't know if it's a chicken or an egg that brings you to being an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
Like, is it the ability to jump between roles that lets you be an entrepreneur, or did you learn that and now you're an entrepreneur? It doesn't matter, but that
I kind of think
it's
that
invaluable.
latter.
It's invaluable because first of all, I do think there's something really important about like doing all the roles if you're going to be in charge at some point of all of those departments, right? Or
And-
just also like having the humility and the kind of ingenuity to get it done.
Humility, yeah. So actually, like humility, like I was gonna say, is like knowing what you don't know as well. There's probably a lot like you weren't ready to do, but you like pulled it off.
Sure, and
Right.
there's also a huge like kind of logistical. There's like always problem solving, right?
Oh,
It's
I
like
think there's
always-
a solution to every problem.
Absolutely. And I always, people sometimes, I think the perception is the shoot days are like these big hard days. For me,
They can get moved.
the work is over, not over, but the stress may be over when I walk onto set. Because I'm very confident that when I get there, if I brought the right stuff, if I have the right team, if I'm working with the right client, like we're going to make something beautiful. We're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Right? Like
That's
I've never
true.
not
That's
pulled
true.
off a shoot.
It makes it easier to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're able to like get scrappy and know you can.
I remember sometimes shooting at Martha, we had to shoot these how-to stories. So there'd be a big story about, say, donuts. And then they would do this little series of photos showing people how to make donuts. And sometimes we'd be really struggling, like, how do we illustrate this? Like, that's going to be hard to do because it wasn't video. It was still, how do we show putting the powdered sugar on, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And sometimes someone would just remind us and say, like, I think maybe that's a caption.
Yeah.
Right? Like, maybe you don't need to take a picture of it. Maybe you just write that and tell people that. Like, you don't have to do everything in one.
Totally. No, I find that in Reels, which is
Definitely.
funny. Back to all roads lead back to Reels. Where, like, with social media,
Yes.
good or bad?
I think it's mostly,
And you don't, and by the way, nuance is an option.
yes. Well, I was about to say it's mostly good, and then I was about to say it's mostly bad. So I guess that's your answer. It's both.
In the space of wellness and health.
In the space of wellness and health,
To get more specific.
I think let's just say pros and cons. The pros, of course, are exposure to new ideas, community, education. Education also falls under the cons because I think there's a lot of misinformation. I mean, everybody talks about that. And I think in some cases there's lack of reality. I think there can be kind of false advertising, for lack of a better word. And then also I think it creates, all the, the classic problems of social media, which is like the comparing and the, self-aggrandizement because you're not doing what that person does and you don't look a certain way or you don't have access to something that somebody else is talking about and cold plunging and this and that. And I think it gets, I think it can get overwhelming. I think it's up to us, though, to manage our own accounts. It's not as easy as it used to be because there's a lot of things that are put in front of us. But I do think that, in general, having an outlet to learn and, we have to be careful of understanding the source and, of course, always like taking everything with a little bit of a skeptical view,
Sure.
but also getting exposed to things is not a terrible thing. And then also, like, if we follow the right people and have the right mindset around it, it can be inspiring. It can feel like a community that you're kind of living in tandem with, or, you know, especially when some of these practices aren't so mainstream, and feeling like you have a little bit of a tribe that you're running with.
Yeah, like we do.
Yeah, like we do.
Which I
For
like.
sure.
I
Yeah,
like. I like
definitely.
having that. It's
Definitely.
It's funny. It's like, yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I also get frustrated, and I talk about it so often, but it's the truth. Like, just the monetization of it all.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like, I do have like some trouble with like the supplements of it all. I guess in my, like, what I see is like, you know, it actually ties into something. So like, you know, wanting to look like somebody else or wanting to be like somebody else, right?
Yes.
So then they see the quick fix,
Right.
like a de-bloat supplement.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like the gut health person, right? So
Right.
I'm very much, and food combining. So it's like
right.
whole foods first. Try that first before you go for.
Definitely.
It's not even like Metamucil, but it's like
Right.
just some
Schlock.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's expensive and unnecessary.
Right. Right.
And that bothers me to no end.
I'm sure.
And that's something that really, like, why education is
You
so.
probably have a very good finger on the pulse, because people probably ask you about this stuff. So you probably get a lot of DMs with people saying, "What do you think of this?" And they send you something that you know is not necessary. It's like, just try not eating a ham sandwich.
Or something. And it's funny. It's not that I mind those DMs, because it actually gives me.
It's research. It's market research.
Well, it's like, I'm like, okay, cool, I can educate you.
Yes.
Or you're turning to me for the, like,
They're asking for help.
You trust me, so that's great. Good to know.
Of course.
But like, I just don't think, I think there's a lot that we don't need and we don't know we need, and it's something I've heard you say before about even like skincare.
For
where
sure,
it's like
for
that,
sure.
where it's like, if you have a moisturizer and like a cleanser in one, which I do now, and it's clean.
Yeah.
I think maybe I'll have you look at it.
Yeah.
But it's like you don't need both.
It kind of goes back to the core that's really this philosophy of how we live, which is like, simple is better. You know, girls used to come into Cat Beauty sometimes and they would show me these really long lists of like everything they've tried for their skin. Wow. And am I missing something? Is there something I haven't tried yet that might work? And they had acne and it was painful, and it was like, you know, I could just look at this list and kind of imagine how much money they'd spent. And I would think, like, maybe you're allergic to dairy. Maybe you're allergic to gluten. Like, maybe it's about taking something out, not adding more. As consumers and as modern people, we like to think that there's something we can buy that's going to fix everything. And the supplement industry preys on that.
No, I love that. Yeah. I love the idea. I love the whole thing about like what you don't need. Like, you learn through this, you learn what you don't need.
Right.
And like, or how much you don't need. And like that, you know, it can sound, it can, and I'll be honest, like it can totally at a base level, coming from a mind who doesn't, like, you know about food combining or whatever.
Right.
It can sound like disordered.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I felt awkward saying that because I know it's not that easy. It's not like, oh, just stop eating, just fast. It's not that. It's more
not.
about when, you know, they talk all the time. This is an interesting thing that I think should get more attention, that I hear mention of, and I think I first learned this concept, I think Donna James, the nutritionist, was talking about it. But the idea is, if your fulfillment and satiety, I never know how to say that word.
No,
satisfaction from
feeling
your food,
satiated,
feeling full, comes from getting the right nutrition, not from getting an excess of calories. And so if you're eating a diet that is high in calories but very empty of nutrition, you're going to want more food.
Yeah.
Because you haven't gotten what you need yet.
Yeah.
if you're eating lighter foods that are more nutrient dense and less calorically dense, like a salad, you're probably going to be more satisfied because you're actually getting the nutrition. And that's where like you can start to count macros or do those things, or you can just experiment and know that like, hey, if I eat a salad with no oil and lemon, I'm pretty hungry pretty fast. But if I put some avocado on that salad or add some olive oil, I feel fuller longer and I don't need a snack. Right? So it's just about kind of learning what works for you and learning to experimenting and playing and eating really delicious food that is like abundant and well made, and it's as simple as that sometimes. And I I certainly don't want to sound like, oh, it's easy, the answer is just eat less, because I know that's not easy, and I know that doesn't work in that way, and it just doesn't work. But I think the answer is eating more correctly or more. And I don't pretend that that's one answer for everyone, but I do think it's about finding the foods that you can put in your body and the right quantities of those foods that help you with whatever you need to be doing, whether it's clearing up acne or having a better mind or better sleep or better mood or better weight, whatever it is.
It's like I get asked all the time, like, do you think every body is different? At the most simplest term, yes. Every body is different. Yeah. Correct. But we all have the same digestive system. Right. However, we also all have different health journeys. So like like if you started, I think you have to ease into if you want this like to sort of have this intuitive eating that we have, which we can now understand the term, and it's that's a term that I personally can roll my eyes at too, because
totally.
I understand that how and why other people roll their eyes at it, because it's not that easy. But I understand it, and you do too. But I think a lot of people, like I think it also just depends on how far you are into your health like journey, how much you care about, like, you know, how much time and effort you've put into things. And like you said, a lot of women have come into Cat Beauty to you with their list of like all the stuff they've tried, right? And like for me it was like all the doctors I've tried, all the supplements I've tried, all the powders I've tried, all the stuff. And it's exhausting, and it's like you're wasting your time and money. And that's like one of like my like pain points even from like combined is like not wasting your time and money, because it's not New York or anywhere. Nobody has all that to waste.
Right. And it makes me bristle sometimes when kind of the complaint about how expensive it is, and then it's hard to argue when people are waving like $10,000 cold plunges around, and every supplement you add in is another $100 a month.
But go take a cold shower.
But there's so many ways to do it inexpensively, and I think food combining is such an easy one. It's like, you know what? I love the way I eat. It's a nice way to live.
Well, I did make you a salad. This came from the refrigerator. we just took a brief pause, but it's like Cindy's salad.
Oh my God, my first combined.
Your first combined. I'll explain it.
So exciting.
I'll explain it.
Oh my God, it's gorgeous.
It has spring mix, fennel, like all the live things we love.
I see the fennel. Oh my God, that's so beautiful.
What else in it? Alfalfa sprouts.
Nice.
It's sprouted. It's all the stuff I know.
Good.
You love.
It is. It's everything I love.
And like basil, lots of herbs. Like, 'cause salads can be fun. That's my big thing. I know it's your big thing.
Oh, big time.
Salads can be fun. Salads can be. They're not just like boring lettuce, carrot, cucumber, whatever. You know, it can be interesting. Yeah. And that's something I know we connect on anyways. And then I also put some, what's it called on the side? Sauerkraut on the side, just in case you wanted a little fermented moment, which I thought you might.
Always do.
And a cashew, like a crema.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is so beautiful.
No, of course.
This was super fun. I'm gonna eat it all
Thank
up.
you.